Here we go. Our agenda today, the value of QuickLaunch. Why QuickLaunch? A little bit about preferred strategies. Who are we as a valued Viewpoint partner? We value that relationship. Business intelligence market, just a bit on that. QuickLaunch, what makes up that secret sauce? And then Ben's going to take us through a live demonstration, again, focusing on job cost information with a sneak peek preview of what we'll be covering next. And then we'll address any questions that are in the panel or on your chat. A couple of highlights I like to point out that get me excited about using QuickLaunch. I know you have a ton of data in Vista, and there's a lot of value in there, but how do you get your arms around it in a meaningful way? So how can you create visuals, dashboards your way, have report notifications, reports that are easily accessible in any browser-based environment or on your phone in a mobile-friendly environment. Add some capabilities to be able to comment and collaborate amongst your team. You know, why is this job over budget? Why is this cost posted to my cost code? Why does this productivity rate look to be out of bounds? And build up some commentary around that and get some information. Leverage the power of Microsoft to ask questions of your data. That's a really cool part. I've actually connected on my phone Siri, where I can ask for my receivables report, and it'll bring it up, and it'll tag the receivables that are closest to my geographic location. I don't know how much value is in that, but it was pretty fun that I was easily able to do it. And then leverage Microsoft Artificial Intelligence for some insights on your data. And then finally, I think another value statement that's worth making is if you have data in other data sources, like a bid to win, our project management solution, or anything where you wished you could pull on one dashboard data from multiple sources, we support that as well. Ben, anything you would add to that?
No, makes sense.
Okay. And then the tool, QuickLaunch, easy to use and configure, and that's great. But how do we take care of you? And I think that's equally important. So our professional services to implement and configure QuickLaunch, give you training to get you started. Our whole mission is to put the power of your data in your hands so you can manipulate these dashboards, filter, add fields, and take ownership of it with us back there to support you and guide you and listen to you. And I think we do such a, I say this being humble, by the way, no way arrogant, but our team has done such a great job in doing that. We have 100% client retention. Those that use the model, stay with the model. Just a quick visual so you can see. I think Ben's going to give us a nice real live show of this on the mobile, but what I like to show here is when you're using something that's truly a mobile application, it's going to be responsive, right? So if I look at something in a portrait mode and I tilt it to landscape mode, it's going to become landscape friendly. It's called responsive UI, and Microsoft certainly provides that in Power BI. Just a bit about our team. Preferred Strategies has been laser focused on business intelligence tools for 17 years. Our mission is to partner with companies that really do value their data and are looking to kind of begin a data transformation journey, if you will, to be able to run their business more proactively, get information and spot trends more quickly. The best example I've seen of that, honestly, is you look at a big job cost report in the traditional text sense, columns and rows, and you're trying to find the trends. Hard to spot, but when you see that report in a big visual board with a big red dot, it stands out right in front of you. Our mind works that way. We see those trends. So how can we visualize our data? And then just a bit about Gardner and Forrester Wave reports. What's more interesting to me than the fact that you can see you want to be in the upper right quadrant as a leader, Microsoft certainly is in both instances, especially with Power BI and Excel. I think a few of us still might use Microsoft Excel. Ben will speak to that. But what's more interesting to me is if you look at these reports trending over the last several years, you see Microsoft continuing to lead the pack as Microsoft has brought their powerful and vast resources into Office 365. So once you have your data in Power BI, you can actually use other tools. You can leverage Teams, you can leverage Microsoft Automate, used to be known as Flow. So Microsoft has made those investments, and it shows in how much of the market adoption they have. So leveraging that tool is great. And I will add that, you could use those tools off any data, but you look at data like Vista or any ERP system, it's transactional. So it's meant to optimize transactions, not so much reporting. That's the value that we add, which leads me to our secret sauce here. It's a three-step process. One is prepping the data. So as you see here, We take Viewpoint and optionally other data sources, like I mentioned, say an HCSS, bid to win, project management system, what have you. And as an option, we can store that data in an operational data store. And that's for clients that have millions of rows, I'd say, of data where we really need to do that, make that copy of that data for more and better responsiveness to the reporting. So an option. But regardless, what we're doing is structuring that data in the data model, step 2, so that it's easy for you to go ahead and report on. All those things you have to write formulas for, earned revenue to date. Now I want to take that and slice it by fiscal period. I've written those reports in Crystal and Excel a bit, and there's a lot of formulas, a lot of filtering to make it happen. So we've done all that hard work over years to build those models so it's easy for an end user to get to that data, and then slice and dice it by things like division, calendar, whatever your system setup is. And we also allow you to leverage the power of user-defined fields if you use those in Vista as well. And data governance, because we're working off the transactional data in Vista to build the model, you can drill down to the transactions. So you truly are getting that one version of the truth, as they say, and as we say. So Ben will actually show us that. So step 3, the data delivery through Power BI, Excel, what have you, that's Power BI screen. That's great, but what makes it very powerful is what's happening in step 2. Now, Ben, with your technical acumen, would there be anything you would add to that?
No, I think I just emphasized that we'll be looking today at step 3. That's the only way really to query the data and see it, and whether that tool is Power BI or Excel or some other tool. There's a lot of options at the delivery side, but the power is in the model. And I'm going to emphasize that a lot as we talk about using Power BI today, talk about the model and what it brings. So that's that step 2. When I refer to the model, that's step 2 in the demonstration.
Thank you, Ben. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ben Harrison, our BI Solutions Architect. Like Ben and myself, we both came and spent several years working directly at Viewpoint and really understand and value, the power you have in Vista, and really appreciate our opportunity to be a partner with Viewpoint. Ben doesn't always like it, but I always say the young and handsome Ben Harrison. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate that. So I'm going to just start talking a little bit about Power BI. Some of you in the webinar probably have used it, but I want to make sure we're clear about what you're seeing. So this is the Power BI site. It's a web service that Microsoft, provides. We don't have anything really to do with it at Preferred Strategies, but it's a tool that we really, really like. It's kind of a market-leading BI capability these days. There's kind of 3 components to Power BI. There's a desktop tool that you can download for free. That's just really a writing tool, a report writing tool. Those reports then that you develop on your desktop get published to this site, and then the reports in this site can be accessed either just through the web, as we're doing here, or through a mobile device. And I'll pull up my phone in a little while and show you what that report looks like. So the idea that your reports, your Vista data is available to you anywhere, anytime is a really important aspect of what Power BI is providing. So looking at that, again, just a quick look at Power BI. In there's this concept of workspaces. Workspaces are where you might be sharing some content across different groups of people. In this case, I'm looking at my Viewpoint workspace. I might have a general ledger workspace and a job cost workspace. And we do in the model provide the opportunity for security. So you can have security based upon job or department, but also you can have security based upon reports and workspaces. And workspaces and apps work together. We're don't have time to get into that, but so we're going to be looking right now in a particular workspace for Viewpoint, and I'm going to be focusing on job cost. In a workspace, you might have dashboards. I'm going to come back to that, reports and data sets. Think about that data set. Again, we talked about that step 2. Data set becomes a governed source of your data, one governed source of data. So every report can look at one single set of data. And this is a big deal to me. I used to write Crystal reports all the time, and every Crystal report has a data set in it. And so if you make a change to a definition of revenue or gross profit, you're making a lot of changes that you won't need to do if you're using a data set that feeds many, many reports. So I'm going to look at a particular report now, kind of this job cost report. And when it comes up, just as navigation, I've got a filter pane all the way over to the right. That kind of tells me what has been filtered so far on this report. I'm going to kind of get rid of that. Then I have different tabs here on the left, right? So right now I'm looking at Billings tab, and just to start navigating kind of the functionality that the data model brings, we have a strong calendar function, right? So right now, you know, it's this time selection element set to job to date. I could easily change it to show me month to date. I could actually change it and say show me year to date. And again, as I do that, my reports are changing. So again, what we find is as people are drilling down and analyzing the data in Vista, the ability to slice and dice between different periods really extends the information you can grab from the system, right? So the idea of slicing by month or date, the date lets you change, you know, calendar month. My sample data is quite old, so I have 2010. Obviously, you'd probably want to have 2019 or so. But the other part of visual reports, it should really change how you think about seeing your data, how you think about looking at reports, to where an element now, notice I'm hovering over a single bar on there and I'm getting some additional information. Those are called tooltips. So the data set has lots of information, more than you can really display visually. But as you hover over things, you want to be able to pull up those additional elements. So again, how you think about data, how you see data, a really good visualization tool and a depth of a data model provides options and choices that you don't have in traditional tools. I'm going to go ahead and do a drill down. I'm looking here at revenue by project manager, and maybe I want to drill down to revenue by job. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll do that by right-clicking in this case. I'm going to drill down, and I've built a hierarchy here. Hierarchies are defined by you. In this case, I've said go from project manager to job, but it could be from department to customer to contract to job. All those hierarchies are built into the data model so that you're able to kind of build these reports so that it makes sense for your business. I've done that now. I see that this Lane County has particular jobs, but in addition to drilling down, I have the ability to do a thing called drill through, right? So think about wanting to ask why. We'll look later on at some productivity data, but the thought is I need to now look up something about this job. I shouldn't have to run another report. The data should be here and accessible for me so that I can quickly drill in and ask those why questions. So I might want to say, well, show me the job profit details. And this is where it's going to take me to another page with those details in it. Frank hinted at this, and I'll emphasize that. We're building these reports, these data sets, on the transactional data system. So in job costs, it's the cost detail table and the cost billing detail table. So those that are union together, and we have a single fact table, and I can then drill and get through to the detail data and the same report, right? So the idea that I don't need to go run something else somewhere else to look into the why. Why am I over budget? Why am I behind schedule? Those whys should be answerable here in this one report, and particularly on any device, anytime. So other ideas about the data model that are important to consider. The data model, that step 2 in that chart, also provides the ability to set up metadata. So if you notice that I've got jobs, locations plotted on a map, we can do that because in the model, those address fields, the state, the postal code, the city, the county, all those have been flagged as being geographically defined. And so that means that a reporting tool like Bing can just plot those, right? So again, it adds this capability that you did not have before. So great features available because the data model kind of expands what meanings are. The other thing we're doing is creating additional things that don't exist. So that's that data governance. Every system, every transaction system has essentially billing details and cost details, either the estimated contract amount or the estimated budget for cost. But what you really want to analyze are variations of those revenues and costs. So backlog, profit, earned revenue. Those things are built into the data model. And back to that concept of data governance, you're going to have that defined once. So it gives a much quicker, easier to manage way to kind of port out reports. So again, earnings, profit, all these are the ideas that you might think of trying to do analysis on. We already talked about the idea I might want to look at job profit details, but even down to the WIP reporting, where you might want to say, well, what's my earned revenue? What's my backlog revenue? Start analyzing, what's your profitability looking like in the coming months or years. So all that information is visible. The idea of the calendar also then adds the idea that I can actually now look at this over time. Now you'll notice that my sample data set, I've got some data here in 2016, 2018. We don't actually have a real construction company that's generating data, so these are just sample jobs. But again, it's not only what's the data right now, but the data set's complete to where I can analyze those trends over time, whether that trend is billing or productivity or new contract work, so that you actually are able to do a lot of analysis because the time factor, the trend factor that the data model has complete. You're probably going to want to have specific charts that would deal with individual users. So project manager, this is back again to the idea that I can have one report, but I can have security on the data set to where I can see my jobs, Frank can see his jobs, and if I don't, we don't want to share that information, then that would be, we could manage that. So cost details, job billing details, again, those would be drilling all the way down to the actual detail files of job costs, right? So the actual detailed transactions. That's important to me because a project manager is going to eventually be looking at a report and saying, wait a minute, I'm not over budget on that. They ought to be able to drill down to see what are those transactions? Was something miscoded? Do we need to do a cost transfer? Those are the questions that a project manager wants to both understand and be able to resolve or find out how to resolve it. Another element in the kind of the data model is this idea of variances and unit rate productivity. So in this case, I'm looking really at some variances and some unit rate productions where I'm saying, well, what's my actual unit cost? What's my estimated unit cost? What's my variance between those costs? And waterfall charts are really good at seeing that data. So in this case, I've picked a specific job 2600, and I've got the kind of the item and description on those, and I'm analyzing this contract by contract item to see where am I making money and where am I losing money. And I could easily just pick a single contract item and understand the variance and why I'm not making money on that item. I could pick a different contract item. And again, the idea of hierarchies, I've picked contract item, but it could be job phases or groups of job phase. It's probably many of you have meanings on your job phase codes where there's maybe segments that have specific values. I built one of these charts one time for a high-rise construction company that wanted to understand their production by floor, right? So they did the same steps as they raised this building floor by floor, but they wanted to understand as you get to certain levels of height, the 50th floor, your cost is actually different just in terms of getting materials there than on the 20th floor. So part of that is that understanding and in providing the data model and the data governance to be able to understand and track that in order to drive productivity and profitability. Again, the topic of our subject today was job cost profitability. How do you increase that? And really what the message we're trying to say is you've got all this data. It needs to be structured in a way that gives you that insight into what's going on. let's look at maybe another way of looking at that was a unit rate productivity on item. Maybe we care more about just over under cost budgets, right? So this is again, looking at variance by cost budgets, and I can do all sorts of color coding to draw your eye to certain elements. And this is, again, an important aspect of reporting. Frank mentioned that. Visually, you should be able to come through and say, I understand what's the most important thing on this page. It's going to be the ones that are red. That's the way I've defined it. Maybe it's if it's a profitable job in this case, what I've done is set up the top 10, both losers and winners here at the top. So these are jobs, and I can say, well, let's look at the best winners here. In this case, the jobs that are under budget. You can see I've got green. There's one account that's bad, but then I've arranged it so where the blues are kind of good. So the idea to give end users the ability to quickly slice through the data to understand what's happening on their job and what needs attention today. So that actually brings that idea of what's happening on a job and how do we know this goes. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my phone, and my phone has this same report on it because I've published it to Power BI, this site. So we're looking at this report in the service. Now we're looking at the same report on my phone. So what is this telling me? This tells me that I have one report, multiple delivery methodologies. I can actually change my phone structure and kind of change it. Now it looks a lot more like that, but maybe I do want to see it in a kind of a phone mode. But this, again, changes the dialogue at your company. When I rolled this out at the construction company I used to work at, the president really liked it because he would routinely go and meet his project managers for lunch, and he'd have questions about the jobs they're doing. And they would say, well, let me get back to the office and I can look at that report. Well, this now gives them a basis of conversation wherever they're at, whether they're at lunch or on the job site or anywhere they have accessibility to their phone or their tablet. They can look and slice through this data. So again, very powerful in terms of that. And I'll just go ahead and pick a job there again, the same sort of capabilities that I have as if I was sitting in front of a web browser. So that phone mobility is a big selling point. Yes, Frank?
I know you're going to get to this probably, but I couldn't help myself. I'm curious, when you're on the phone mode and, you're at that lunch, if I have a question of somebody, can I use that collaborative, comment back and forth or any of those capabilities right on the mobile?
Yes, you can. In fact, actually, thanks for bringing that up. And so I won't show that on my mobile because it's smaller, but the collaboration is another big element. So we've been talking about reports so far, and notice that there's a comments up here and subscribe. I'm going to go actually back to kind of the main area and talk about that in this dashboard arena. So if I look at maybe a job cost dashboard, think about a dashboard as being a way to group report elements. So a dashboard might have information from accounts payable, it might have information from general ledger or from job cost. And so maybe many report elements could be on a dashboard, and as you use and consume those report elements on the dashboard, it's going to take you to that report. But what you're asking about then is, how do I find out questions? So maybe as the executive vice president, I want to actually make a comment about a certain report or certain dashboard element. This is where I can actually not have to go to Outlook. I can actually come here and make a comment. You can see here that I've made lots of comments to Frank. He and I like playing with this technology. So you might say, hey, Frank, what's going on with this job? Or, hey, Frank, great job. There's record profits, congratulations. So the idea that this collaboration is bringing you closer and tighter as a team, improving your communication back and forth is happening because these are you don't need to go somewhere else to make that happen. And that can happen on your phone, as you mentioned there. Another element of this is I used to make lots of reports for project managers, and I'd say at the end of the month, how come you didn't notice that on the report? And they hadn't read the report. Project managers are busy. So what you want the ability is this concept of subscribing to a report. Send it to me when something happens or when there's a moment in time when that report's apropos. And so I'm going to get a subscription. If I subscribe to a given report or element, I can say send it to me every Friday or every morning, and then that kind of feeding me the reports instead of making me go find that report. So subscription is very important. The other thing about that data report, that data set, I just clicked on this ask a question about your data. And I mentioned the data model. It's got all sorts of information in it. It's got backlog and gross profit and earned revenue and over under budget. And I'll show you that in a minute. But this is the idea that it used to be you'd have to go to IT and say, hey, IT, can you give me a report on backlog? But now I can start doing kind of some initial backlog searching where I'm asking questions of that data set, and it's doing data mining for me. And all I have to know is the word backlog. So that's possible because the data set, that data model, has all these elements defined. So anything in the data model, you can mine through as an end user. Right? So this is no longer an IT department process. It's an end user. So it really changes in your business who can mine data, who can look for those insights, and that's a game changer, in my opinion. You know, the people who have some question they want to ask at midnight on Sunday is a project engineer who's worried about their job the next day. How are they going to meet productivity? And so you don't want them waiting for some other time to ask those questions. You should be able to provide this in the data model so they can ask those questions right now. So again, very, very powerful in terms of like mining through the data set yourself. I wanted to know just briefly, go back to the report, job cost report, and show you what this looks like in the kind of the model. So if I go back and say, I'm getting back at the same report, I'm going to say edit the report. And this is something you might do in that desktop data tool, but this is the model. This is the essence of what we're selling. We're not selling Power BI, we're selling this set of data, the relationships between these data, the job and the contract that joins, where the customer comes in, and then the hundreds of measures. So measures are those time-based elements that may be under actual, that's actual build, job to date, month to date, year to date. The selected is what we use when we want to be able to toggle between job to date, month to date, year to date dynamically. So again, all those are built from an actual perspective, hours, dollars, units, markup, profit. We've got all the budgets in there from your jobs, from your contracts, so estimated contract, estimated cost, estimated unit cost, right? So some productivity elements maybe, or over under budget. All these measures are the things that people might want, and they might want to kind of build these things themselves. So you don't need to be a Crystal Report expert to access this data. It's going to expand who can conceive of different ways of seeing your data. So that's, again, I've said it a couple times, and that's one of the hallmarks of having a deep data model with a market-leading BI tool, is it changes how you think about your data and how you think about delivering it to end users so that they can make data-driven decisions about their business, the jobs, the individual phase code items, even by cost type, by contract item, whatever is important. And then, of course, we're bringing down to the details. So I can actually have the AR details. I can actually have the cost details and understand who was paid or who the vendor was or who the subcontractor was. It's all available in depth in the model. So one other thing that's important to know is when we bring in the data to this, any user-defined fields that are on the model will come in as well. So in this case, our sample data has a whole bunch of user-defined fields on the job cost. So those become part of that model for you. Vista is very strong in providing its users the ability to customize with these user-defined fields. And so we want to make sure your reporting tool has all of those capabilities as well. So I've covered a lot, and again, this maybe it's too much too fast. Maybe you're bored, but I want to cover two more things. We talked about mobile. We talked about how that might work, but another element of it, and I've been using Power BI to look at this data set. Again, we love Power BI. We think it's incredibly powerful. It's well thought through. but we make this data set, and that's what we're developing. But this data set is not only for Power BI. It can be used for other elements. So I'm going to pull up an Excel spreadsheet, and here I connected. In this case, I've connected to Power BI, but the data could be connected to another method, all other mechanisms as well. But this data set here is literally the exact same data set. So when I come through and I say, well, give me a job and description, the jobs and description that show up here, and I've disconnected myself. I apologize. I had closed this down and reopened it. But it's the same data set. It's a job and description, the actual cost, the actual billing details. When I use the spreadsheet, will be the exact same numbers, the exact same formulas, because the exact same data as if I was using Power BI. So now you won't have disagreements between, well, my report says this about earned revenue and your report says that about earned revenue, because the definition of earned revenue and actual the instance of the data set are the exact same data set. So that's again very powerful. Yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you because you're really doing a great job, but I do want to interject. I think it'd be great. I just wanted to kind of put out there as a reminder, if you could show how you can leverage notifications. I think it's subscribe to a report. And then I think maybe we switch over to the final Excel product that will be the sneak peek for next week. And then we address the good questions that I see in the panel. So okay, I just wanted to kind of throw that up there to you.
Sure. So I did already talk about subscriptions, I thought. Didn't I mention that?
Oh, maybe you did and I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when I was in the dashboard, I talked about it. But that's this idea up here of subscribing.
Okay.
And you can subscribe to a report and set up the delivery options and time. And we talked about the comments as well. But thanks for
I was so dazzled by your dashboard, I missed it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. Okay, so back to that idea of what you might do with Excel. So next month we're going to be doing another version of this webinar, but that next month we focus on job costs, GL instead of job cost. And so the idea that I can use that data model to feed different tools, whether it's Excel, SSRS, Power BI, the data set's the same. So a lot of our customers are liking to use that data model for some of these more printable reports, like an income statement, maybe a income statement by period, so January, February through December, maybe a balance sheet, right? The idea that the data model, sometimes Excel is a really good tool for visualizing or displaying data. And this gives you a lot of options with that. We even have, and we'll talk next month about AR aging and AP aging and those type of capabilities in the GL. So that's next month, just a sneak preview of kind of what else is possible when you're using our data model with the different tools. So Frank, that was, I think, most of what we planned to cover. Can you think of anything I missed?
No, I thought I did, and you already had covered it, Ben. Such a good job. So, I promised everybody we'd take about a half hour of their valuable time, and I think we're holding close to that. So we've had some good questions. I want to go ahead and address those as best we can. And then, mind you, folks, just as a housekeeping reminder, if you want to add more questions, just open up the question panel. We're monitoring that now, and I will ask Ben, and we can kind of put them to the test. You get to see how smart Ben is. So, Ben, one question, I think this is a good one. Is Vista security at all enforced with Power BI?
It can be. So one of the things to think about Vista security is nice. It's got you by elements defined by Vista, you can create security. We can read that security. In fact, we've got the protocol to do that. So if you set up contract security or job security or company security, we will read that and apply that security to the model. But one of the elements that's possible is you can extend that security. So maybe you have some people who don't ever use Vista, but you want them to be able to get these executive dashboards. So you could actually say, okay, I'm going to read the Vista security and I'm going to expand that so that I also include the president of operations or the someone in HR who needs to see reports but doesn't usually have access to Vista data. That's also important, and you mentioned it in that slide, step 1, 2, and 3. some of your data may not be coming from Vista. Vista would be the foundation of this, but you might add, build to win data or HCSS data. And so you might want security on that data set as well. That is an extension of the Vista security. So that was a long way to say yes, Frank.
Okay, and another one, do you need Power BI Professional or Pro to subscribe for reporting notification?
Yeah, so the nature, again, this is a Microsoft issue. The way they make money on their service is by having you subscribe to the Pro. So that's $9.95 a month. My first report I did for that executive at the company I used to work for, I built him a customer report by revenue by customer, and I said, you can have this, you can use it in Power BI, but it's going to cost you $9.95 a month. And he said, I spend more than that on coffee. So there is a cost to using the Power BI service, only if you want to share or collaborate. But that's the whole point of the Power BI service, is to share and collaborate. So you need to do that. There is a way to get that. It's included in some of your licenses for Office 365. I think the E5 level includes the Power BI subscriptions just as part of that subscription. Did that answer?
Excellent. Okay, and just to clarify, yeah, I think so. And to clarify, that's per user, correct?
Per user, yes.
Okay. And then could you speak a little bit about our licensing of the QuickLaunch model?
Yeah, so we also license it by named user. What we just need to pick a pricing methodology, and that's how we've chosen to do so. So there's a cost per user and a cost per module. Right now we have general ledger, equipment, and job costs. We're adding other modules as we're going, and so the pricing is kind of per user per module.
Thank you. And then one final question I see here. Good. And Ben, by the way, we do have one question about multi-tenant databases. It's a good question. I think it might get a little involved, so I had suggested we take that offline and we'll schedule a follow-up call to address that one.
Okay, that sounds good.
But do you have any suggestions? Let me put it this way. Have you seen any examples of how users have gained more adoption of using the model to get control of their data? How do we get people to try new things using QuickLaunch?
That's a good question, because adoption really is a big element here, and that part of it's a culture. In my experience, the adoption comes best when someone in leadership is asking those questions. So I'll tell you what will happen is, if you're a project manager and you get your executive or your boss sending you a comment twice saying, hey, I noticed in this report something's really good happening or something really bad happening, that's going to drive behavior really quickly. So I think my thought is the biggest driver for adoption is expectations of management. Your employees do Perfect. What you expect of them.
Yep, and then another question just popped in, is service management in the pipeline? And I love this question because I think I know your answer. Please.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we're about halfway through the development of that. I expect to have the working version on work order cost and billings in about 4 weeks. Agreements probably will follow sometime later, but the short answer is yes, we'll have service management soon.